Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and it's been a while since I've made a video for this particular channel. And if you're wondering why, it's because I've been making a lot of content in the world of software development and programming. And if you're interested in learning more about what I'm doing in that space, head over to alexmercedcoder.com and go check out my podcast, the Web Dev 101 podcast. But, there is things to be said about or things I don't think are being said enough about sort of the libertarian mission, that I figured it's time to make another video to talk about it. Okay, and again, there's also my podcast. This will also be the audio of this will also be on my podcast, like the Alex Merced cast and such. But bottom line, what I want to talk about today is why being kind, and making liberty happen, like why kindness is so important. Why does it matter? Okay, is it we're not trying to be kind because we just want people to like us. It's like that isn't the point. Like people always talk about like respectability politics and pandering and whatnot, and basically just trying to put this frame that you're trying to get other people to like you, and this is a bad thing because you're making an appeal. Now, of course, it is always a bad thing when you advocate for bad policies or bad values because you want people to like you, but there's nothing wrong with being kind to others, being empathetic, being tolerant of others even when you disagree with them, to build those relationships. Because oftentimes as like a libertarian, we think about like cause and effect, and we think about like the hard causes and effect, in the sense that like, hey, if you tax a thing, you're gonna get less of it. If you subsidize a thing, you're going to get more of it. So if we keep throwing money at the bad things that are happening, we encourage more bad things to happen. If we keep taxing the good things, then we're going to get less of the good things. Okay, like taxing income and all sorts of subsidizing, whether it's subsidizing unhealthy foods, unhealthy business practices, etc. That you're going to get more of it. And this, yes, I 100% agree. Like I am as free market as you get. Free market in any and all of the above, free movement of people, capital, goods, services, everything. Okay, communication, ideas. I want free movement of it all. But to the extent that people aren't for that, oftentimes it's not because of just some logical argument. Oftentimes, like, it isn't that they don't necessarily understand the. Sometimes they just haven't heard the argument in the abstract. But a lot of times they may have heard it, and they may agree to its plausibility, but what's holding them back is that they're viewing a free world that includes all the people they don't like. And that holds them back. Okay? So the idea is that the more we dislike each other, the more we're not able to build the bridges, the harder it is going to be for people to accept the idea that maybe we should just be more hands-off and accept the practical whether there are and the moral arguments for it, because they're viewing sort of like their own sort of personal sort of disdain for the people that they don't like. Okay, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how moral something is, it doesn't matter how utilitarian something is, it's going to be hard to convince someone that they should make space for people they don't like doing things they don't approve of, per se. Okay, you have to you can't expect everyone to approve of everything. That's not going to happen. But you can get people to a point of at least mutual respect and coexistence. You can get people to be like, okay, I expect that other people are okay enough that I can leave that space to happen. And that's the thing that needs to be fixed. That's the thing I guess libertarians don't necessarily talk about enough. Building those bridges, building that context where people can let go of those grudges and those hates and this imagination of the people that they imagine these two people that they don't like, and then they transpose that into millions of people, or they are painted this image by people who want to divide. They painted this image of this hyper extreme sort of caricature of a person they don't like, which they might impose on a real person. Okay, you can definitely think of scenarios coming from all sorts of different angles where basically you paint a real person in real life as the most extreme and dislikable version of them, when who they are is a lot more complex and nuanced and whatnot. And then they use that as a rallying point, we need to get together because we hate this person, whether it's like a presidential candidate, different political figures. You can all imagine a situation like that where basically they use a person and sort of like caricaturize them to the extreme for the sole purpose of using them as like a rallying cry. And it works. Okay, it can work. Like, you can use like hate, dislike, frustration in a way to motivate people and drive passion for them to throw money at you, for them to dedicate their time to you. But it doesn't necessarily move us towards liberty in the long run. Okay, so because I see this even within like liberty circles where we'll use these tactics, okay, to motivate people, and it works. You can definitely anger can be very motivating, frustration, and having an enemy to defeat can be very motivating. Okay, and yeah, you might be able to win some political battle, but the goal is liberty. And again, to have that context in which liberty is going to not only exist, not just for a point in time, but continue to exist. Again, it's like we may hit a point where like, hey, people are free. But eventually, like, if everyone's a jerk to each other, what's going to happen is that people are going to start wanting other people to be unfree again, and then you end up back where you started. So the question is, how do you create a sustainable freedom? And for that, we need to, like, have respect for each other's space. Okay, and that's created by sort of, taking the first step, being the first person to go out of your way to demonstrate what you're trying to demonstrate by being, like, extra kind even when people aren't kind to you, being extra respectful even when people aren't respectful towards you, not because they deserve it. Not because they deserve it. Not because of some good sense of squishy kindness, but because only by putting out double the amount of the thing we need to counteract the thing we don't need, can we create that sort of culture? Can we like basically push that sort of cultural foundation of just coexistence that's going to allow people to be free and be able to make free choices in commerce and in their personal lives and whatnot, because people over time, as that culture proliferates, become the sort of assumption, the way people look at the world around them, the kind of imposition of, oh, okay, hey, all these people you're giving more license to, more liberty to. Oh, right now they're probably imagining that people they don't like or agree with or dislike or don't respect or just, and again, not even like actual people, a caricature of those people who are much worse than they probably actually are, because like the culture lends to that. The culture pushes them to think in that way. So the idea is you have to move towards a positivity culture that basically when you do the opposite, where basically when all these other people you're freeing are the extreme positive caricature of the people that I like. And of course I want them to be free, because I want these people who do awesome things, who are kind, to be free to be as kind as possible, to do the awesome things they can do as possible. Okay, and that doesn't happen when you push pessimism, when you push when you push this sort of like this way or no way, or that's the wrong way, this way. Like, point is, if you focus too much on like the things that divide, you're not creating that culture that's going to really like facilitate like a real sort of, because again, it's like the policy is our words on paper, but at the end of the day, like really what people are going to allow, how free people are going to be in society. Like, we've seen places where like there are rules on the book that are ridiculous, but people break the rules all the time and no one enforces them because the culture says like this is not worth enforcing. We're fine with, everyone's okay with it. At the end of the day, like there's a lot of policy in action. The actual policy, when it's implemented, only is implemented to the extent that the culture kind of allows it to be. Okay, and its actual implementation is very much shaped by the culture, the context in which it exists. So if we can create a culture where basically no one desires for very little of anything to be enforced, it doesn't necessarily matter if we do change the policy, although chances are it would, because policy tends to lag culture. So as the culture changes, the policy will change. But you'll start seeing the actual benefits of people's lives earlier. Okay, and I mean these are the kind of similar to arguments you'll see for things like agorism. Like, hey, like if you withdraw from the system, and I'm totally not against that. In your own ways by participating in black markets, whatnot. You create change that happens right now. But to me, I think culturally creating a positivity culture, around things like tolerance, kindness, forgiveness. These are the things that kind of hold people back from like coexistence, like people who like can't forgive other people for their perceived slights, and so they let it go, and they just want to like punish them, okay? Because that punishment drives into a desire like for violence. Being kind to others encourages others to be kind. Okay, being tolerant, allowing people to coexist, leads to other people being tolerant. And then again, if we all just kind of allowed each other to coexist instead of constantly being tied up in each other's business and what we think each other should do, and like just constantly up in each other's business. Okay, and not even necessarily policy-wise, just in general, like in our life. Like, have you guys spent time on social media? That's all people are doing. They're all up in each other's business, and and it's that's not necessarily like. And I get it, like like people find entertainment in others, okay? And people find entertainment in the drama, the conflicts of others. I mean, that's what most books, most TV shows, most movies are, and that's fine. I'm all for fiction, okay? And I'm all for the occasional reality show, but we kind of want to move away from people seeing like every aspect of society, every aspect of life as entertainment that necessitates conflict to keep interesting. Okay, and politics has very much become a source of entertainment for everybody, and everyone just wants conflict for the entertainment value of it, and basically it's actually slowly tearing at the foundation of the culture that kind of holds society together. Yeah, and again, so this is like a very sort of like, again, if you've been watching my videos or podcasts and whatnot for years, like before I was very hardline and like, okay, what we need to do is this economic policy, this free market that, and I still believe that. Like, I still believe like in a world where you have sort of unfettered, sort of free individuals participating with free exchange of capital goods, etc., all the above, free movement of all the above, okay, you're going to be in a better place. But now I've come to a place where like that will only happen if there's a cultural foundation for it. And the culture isn't like everyone. And there's other people who kind of believe in that. Like they believe that there needs to be some culture shift, but they focus a lot on sort of like the institutional barriers, in the sense that like there needs to be rules, okay, not necessarily laws that are enforced by a government, but there needs to be sort of these cultural rules and like property rights, things like that, and that has to be sort of hard grained and enforced in the way we proliferate our culture. I take a kind of a different approach. I think that if we have a culture that respects each other and is kind to each other, property rights will emerge. We will naturally want to respect each other's boundaries. Okay, vice versa. If you sit there and push the boundaries or culturally like sit there and create this sort of you talk about the boundaries to people who don't like you, that's actually going to diminish the boundaries. Okay, it doesn't matter how loudly you scream that these boundaries, these cultural boundaries should exist. Think property rights, self-ownership. Doesn't matter how much you scream them, if you sow sort of again a negativity culture, that's just going to erode those ability for those sort of sometimes beneficial cultural boundaries, or those beneficial institutions to exist. Okay, so bottom line, it's the natural overflow of mutual respect is boundaries. Okay, but I don't think the causation necessarily goes the other way, in the sense that if we have boundaries, we will cause respect. Okay, and I mean you can think I can think of situations where you can kind of argue both ways and say, hey, if I were to have like, let's say, a roommate, and if I don't establish boundaries right away, it's naturally going to lead to conflict. But problem is, like, if that roommate doesn't respect me enough, then it doesn't matter that I set boundaries, they're not going to follow them. Okay, we can all think of a roommate that we've had where you've had those kind of conflicts. But of course, worst scenario, even if the person does respect you and you set no boundaries, I've been in a situation like that where, because I respect my roommate, you're extra careful, okay, about trying to like cross boundaries because the boundaries aren't clear. So in that case, you might still have some extent of that, even though it may still not be to the ideal world. Everyone respects each other and there's clear boundaries, because clear boundaries allow us to kind of know what we can and can't do. Because if you do respect others but you don't have clear boundaries, you might hold back because you don't want to cross lines with others. Vice versa, if you don't respect each other and you have clear boundaries, it doesn't matter because people just won't follow. Okay, think about the person who eats someone's food in the work refrigerator. Okay, that's just out of they don't care. It's not like it was unknown that something in the refrigerator belongs to the person who put it in the refrigerator. It's just some people just don't have that level of respect. So it doesn't matter like what the laws are, what the cultural institutions are, if people don't respect each other as individuals. And that's, to me, sort of the everything else stems from that. And that's kind of where I've landed on as a libertarian now, which is why I spend a lot more time talking about just being a nice guy in general, or a nice person in general, than before, where I really kind of focus a lot on like policy and economics and free markets. I still believe in all of that. I just think like the chain of causation starts at us just deciding to like bury hatchets, forgive each other, you know, practice showing empathy towards people, even if we disagree with them, at least trying to show empathy and understanding for what they're going through and why they feel the way they feel. In ways that don't necessarily dismiss what they say, like saying, okay, well, I understand you feel this way, but you're wrong. But being like, you know, there's better ways of communicating, like saying, illustrating, repeating back how people feel, making the connection of like, okay, because you've had this experience, these are your concerns and why you think this is the solution. Don't say it's wrong, just go pivot to your solution and walk it backwards. Be like, okay, here's my solution, here's how it connects to the things, your concerns, and work your way backwards. Instead of sitting there creating this initial sort of having to sit there and have to say no to whatever they're saying before you even give them an opportunity to say yes to what you're saying. Okay, and that's just good communication, but also, again, good communication breeds respect. So communication is also a very important thing. Okay, and I don't mean communication in the sense that like makes people necessarily excited sycophants. Okay, that's not the goal. We're not trying to create like crying masses. What we're trying, we're trying to just create people who are just willing to live their lives and not stress everybody else's every action, because they're okay with other people owning their own actions and having that space in the world. So hopefully you guys found that worth watching. Well, I guess you did if you got this far. But hopefully I'll start doing some more videos like this and talking more. But my name is Alex Merced. Again, you can find all my stuff over there at alexmercedlibertarian.com and libertarian101.com. And if you want to hear more about libertarianism or hear a lot of my old videos about like policy and markets and all these things. But otherwise, I will see you all later. Have a great day and enjoy.